Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we break down chess games with a coaching twist to help you level up your play. Today, we're diving into an exciting game between OngoleBull and opponent, featuring a balanced battle in the opening phase. Let's jump right into it and see what lessons we can uncover together. E4 is a classic way for white to start, grabbing central space and opening lines for the bishop and queen. This move sets the tone for an open, tactical game. E5 from black is the most natural response, mirroring white's control of the center and keeping the game symmetrical. Both sides are fighting for the heart of the board here. Knight f3 develops a knight toward the center and immediately attacks black's e5 pawn. This is textbook development, putting pressure and preparing to castle. Knight f6 from black is another standard developing move, attacking white's e4 pawn and preparing to castle kingside. This position is very much in the spirit of the Petrov defense, where symmetry and solid development are key themes. Knight c3 is a flexible developing move, supporting the e4 pawn and aiming to control the d5 square. It's a bit more aggressive than the usual d4 in Petrov lines, signaling white's intent to keep options open. d6 shores up black's center, defending the e5 pawn and preparing to develop the dark squared bishop. This move keeps the position solid but slightly passive, which is typical in these lines. Bishop c4 develops the bishop to an active square, targeting the vulnerable f7 pawn and putting pressure on black's kingside. This is a key strategic idea. White wants to maximize piece activity early. Bishop e7 is a natural developing move for black, preparing to castle and neutralizing white's bishop pressure on f7. Both sides are following sound opening principles here. d3 supports the e4 pawn and opens a diagonal for white's dark squared bishop. This move signals a more positional approach, aiming for a solid center and gradual build-up. Short castling from black is the logical step to safeguard the king and connect the rooks. Castling early is a fundamental opening principle. Short castling from white mirrors black's move, completing development and ensuring king safety. Both players are now ready to start maneuvering their pieces for middle game plans. Knight c6 develops black's knight to a natural square, increasing control over the center and preparing for potential breaks like d5. h3 is a prophylactic move by white, preventing black's bishop or knight from jumping to g4 and pinning the knight on f3. This is a subtle but important strategic idea to maintain flexibility. Knight a5 is an interesting choice by black, immediately challenging white's active bishop on c4. The knight move aims to exchange off a strong piece and reduce white's attacking potential on the kingside. Bishop b3 retreats the bishop to a safe square, maintaining pressure along the diagonal and avoiding the knight's attack. This keeps white's bishop active and ready for future operations. Knight takes b3 captures the bishop, trading off a key attacking piece for black. This exchange slightly changes the character of the position. Black gives up some dynamic potential for structural solidity. A takes b3 recaptures, opening the a-file and slightly weakening white's queenside pawn structure, but in return white gains the bishop pair advantage and potential for rook activity along the a-file. This is a classic imbalance that both sides will try to exploit. a6 is a typical waiting move by black, preventing white's knight or bishop from landing on b5 and preparing for possible b5 pawn expansion. It's a flexible move that keeps options open. Bishop d2 develops white's bishop, connecting the rooks and preparing to support the queenside pawns or even reroute the bishop to a more active diagonal. This slow build-up is a good example of patient development. Bishop d7 mirrors white's move, completing black's development and connecting the rooks. Both sides have now finished their opening development and are ready for middle game plans. Knight h2 is a curious knight maneuver by white, possibly aiming to reroute the knight to f1 and then g3 or f3, where it can support kingside attacks or control key squares. This shows a flexible approach to piece placement. h6 is a prophylactic move by black, preventing white's pieces from using g5 as an outpost and giving the king some luft to avoid back rank issues. It's a small but important detail in king safety. f4 is an aggressive thrust by white, aiming to challenge black's e5 pawn and open lines for an attack. This move signals a shift from slow build-up to active play, trying to seize the initiative. E takes f4 captures the pawn, opening the e-file and creating tension in the center. Black accepts the challenge, but this also opens lines that white can potentially exploit with quick development and piece activity. Bishop takes f4, white recaptures on f4 with the bishop, a natural and solid move. This keeps material balanced and develops the bishop to an active square, eyeing black's kingside. The key idea here is maintaining piece activity and control over central dark squares. c6, black shores up the center, supporting the d5 square and preparing to challenge white's central pawns. This is a typical strategic move to solidify the pawn structure and restrict white's central expansion. e5, white pushes forward in the center, trying to gain space and open lines for the pieces. However, this move slightly overextends because it leaves the d4 square less supported and can become a target. d takes e5, black captures on e5, immediately challenging white's central push. This exchange opens the d-file and creates tension that black can exploit. Bishop takes e5, white recaptures with the bishop, keeping pressure on black's position and maintaining piece activity. This is a good practical choice, aiming to keep the initiative. Knight d5. Black places the knight aggressively in the center, attacking white's bishop and increasing control over key squares. This move also threatens to exchange off an active white piece, which can ease black's defensive tasks. Knight takes d5. White decides to exchange knights, simplifying the position. This is a critical decision because it removes black's strong centralized knight but also opens the c-file for black's rook after the recapture. c takes d5, black recaptures, opening the c-file and gaining a semi-open file for rook activity. This move also keeps the pawn structure flexible, allowing potential breaks like c5 later. Knight g4. Here, white makes a tactical attempt to create threats on black's kingside. However, this move is a bit premature and weakens control over the center and key squares. The engine suggests better was knight f3, reinforcing the center and preparing to support kingside attacks more safely. Bishop e6, black develops the bishop to a strong central square, contesting white's control and preparing to connect rooks. However, black missed a sharper option here. Queen b6 check, which would have put immediate pressure on white's king and forced concessions. This shows how tactical alertness can turn a good move into a great one. d4. White pushes the pawn to challenge black's center and open lines for the light-squared bishop. This is a thematic break in such closed structures, aiming to activate pieces and gain space. Rook c8. Black places the rook on the open c-file, a classic strategic principle. Rooks belong on open or semi-open files to maximize their activity. This move prepares for pressure against white's c3 pawn and control over the c-file. c3. White solidifies the center and prevents black's pieces from infiltrating via d4 or b4. This move also supports the d4 pawn and prepares for potential pawn breaks or piece maneuvers. Bishop g5. Black develops the bishop actively, pinning white's knight and increasing pressure on the kingside. This move aims to create tactical threats and restrict white's piece mobility. Queen e1. White retreats the queen to a more defensive post, possibly preparing to support the kingside or reposition the queen for attack. However, this move is slightly passive. The engine suggests bishop g3 would have been better to maintain pressure and keep options open. Queen b6. Black counters by placing the queen on an active square, targeting b2 and supporting potential pressure on the queenside. Still, black missed a tactical shot here. Bishop takes g4, which would have disrupted white's kingside structure and opened lines for an attack. b4. White pushes on the queenside, gaining space and trying to undermine black's pawn structure. This is a good strategic idea to create counterplay on the flank. Rook ce8. Black doubles rooks on the e-file, increasing pressure on white's center and preparing for potential breakthroughs. This aligns with the principle of coordinating heavy pieces on open files. Knight takes h6 check. White sacrifices the knight with check, aiming to open lines against black's king. This is a bold attacking idea, but unfortunately, it's a blunder here. The evaluation swings drastically in black's favor by nearly 4 pawns. Why? Because after this capture, white's attack fizzles out, and black gains a decisive material and positional advantage. The better move is queen g3, keeping the pressure and preparing a more effective assault. Bishop takes h6, black calmly captures the knight, accepting the sacrifice and maintaining material advantage. This move consolidates black's position and prepares to repel white's attack. Queen g3, white tries to regroup and create threats, but the position is already lost. Black's material and positional edge are overwhelming. Queen d8, black retreats the queen to a safe square, ready to defend and coordinate pieces. Interestingly, black missed a chance to press harder with f5, which would have further restricted white's pieces and increased winning chances. Rook f6, white brings the rook into the attack, trying to create counterplay. However, this is too little, too late. Black's position remains dominant. King h7, black sidesteps with the king, avoiding any checks and preparing to finish the game. This move sets up a forced mate in just a few moves. Black missed an even stronger move, bishop e3 check, which would have forced white's king into a mating net even faster. Rook takes h6 check. What a powerful strike. White sacrifices the rook to rip open black's kingside defenses. This move is a forcing check that disrupts black's king's safety and initiates a mating net. The key idea here is to open lines and remove the defender on h6. King takes h6, black accepts the sacrifice, but this is exactly what white wants. By capturing, black's king becomes exposed and vulnerable to a swift attack. The takeaway here is that sometimes accepting material can be dangerous if it leads to a compromised king position. Queen takes g7 check. White's queen jumps in with a check, grabbing a pawn and continuing the assault. This move forces black's king to keep moving, which is critical because the king's safety is paramount in the middle game. Notice how white is coordinating queen and rook to create threats. King h5, black's king tries to escape the checks by stepping forward, but this is walking into the lion's den. The king is now dangerously exposed in the center of the board, a classic mistake when under attack. Better would have been to seek shelter behind pawns or pieces, but here options are limited. Queen h7 check. White continues the relentless checks, forcing black's king to dance around. However, here white missed a sharper move. g4 check would have been even stronger, cutting off the king's escape squares and accelerating the mating sequence. This teaches us to always look for moves that restrict the opponent's king mobility the most. King g5, black's king moves again, desperately trying to avoid mate. But the problem is that every step forward only leads deeper into white's net. This highlights the danger of an exposed king in the middle game. Once it starts running, it often runs into traps. h4 check. White pushes the pawn with check, a strong move that forces black's king further into the open. However, white missed a better continuation. Queen g7 check would have maintained maximum pressure and kept black's king more confined. This shows how even in winning positions, precision speeds up the finish. King g4, black's king steps forward, but now it's almost trapped. The key idea here is that the king has no safe squares left, and white's pieces are perfectly coordinated to deliver mate. Queen g7 check, white checks again, but this is a missed opportunity. The engine suggests rook f1 would have been better, bringing another piece into the attack and tightening the noose. This teaches us the importance of piece coordination in mating nets. Sometimes adding more attackers is better than repeated checks. King f5, black's king tries to flee, but all escape routes are covered. This move shows desperation rather than a sound defensive plan. Rook f1 check. White finally brings the rook into the attack with check, a decisive step that limits black's king movement and prepares the final blow. This is a textbook example of doubling heavy pieces to deliver mate. King e4, black's king moves forward, but it's a dead end. The king is now completely trapped by white's queen and rook. Queen h7 check, white checks again, but here was a missed chance. Queen g3 would have been stronger, cutting off escape squares more efficiently and speeding up mate. This position teaches us to always consider moves that restrict the opponent's king rather than just checking. King e3, black's king moves closer to the center, but it's walking into a mating net. The better defensive try was f5, which would have blocked some escape squares and delayed mate. This shows how even a small pawn move can be critical in defense. Queen h6 check, white checks again, but missed an even stronger move. Queen c2 would have sealed black's fate faster by cutting off the king's retreat. This is a great lesson in looking for quiet moves that restrict the king instead of just forcing checks. King d3, black's king tries to run, but the net is closing fast. b3, white pushes a pawn, but this is a slight slip. The engine suggests c4 would have been better, controlling more squares and preventing black's king from advancing. This highlights the importance of pawn moves in controlling key squares during mating attacks. King takes c3, black captures the pawn, trying to create counterplay by grabbing material. However, this move walks into a forced mate. The better defensive try was bishop g4, which would have blocked some lines and complicated white's attack. This shows how active defense can sometimes delay mate. Queen c1 check. White checks with the queen, forcing black's king further into the corner. This is a precise move, tightening the mating net. King takes b3, black captures another pawn, but this only hastens the end. The engine suggests king takes b4 would have been better, trying to stay closer to the center and avoid immediate mate. This teaches us that sometimes staying central is safer than grabbing material. Rook f3 check. White checks with the rook, cutting off escape squares and preparing the final mating sequence. This is a textbook rook lift in a mating net. King a4, black's king moves to the edge, but this is the last gasp. The king is trapped with no safe squares left. Rook a3 check. White delivers the final check with the rook, forcing black's king into a mating position. This move sets up mate in 1. King b5, black's king moves, but now it's checkmate next move. The key takeaway here is how piece coordination, forcing checks, and controlling escape squares combine to deliver a beautiful mating net. This sequence teaches us the power of relentless pressure and precise calculation in the middle game attack. Queen c5 checkmate, and here it is, the final blow. White's queen slides to c5 delivering checkmate. This is a perfect example of how coordination and patience pay off in the endgame. Despite black having an extra rook earlier, white's precise piece activity and relentless pressure left black's king completely trapped with no escape squares. Notice the key strategic theme here: king safety trumps material advantage. Black's extra rook was useless because the king was exposed and white's queen and rook worked together flawlessly to deliver mate. This position teaches us that in the endgame, it's not just about counting material but about controlling critical squares, restricting the enemy king, and coordinating your pieces for a decisive attack. Also, remember the importance of forcing moves, checks, captures, and threats that limit your opponent's options and gradually squeeze their king into a mating net. White's final move, Queen c5 checkmate, is a textbook finish. The queen covers all escape squares, and the rook supports from behind, sealing black's fate. If black had tried to keep the king safer earlier or avoided walking into the mating net, the game could have lasted longer. But this sequence beautifully highlights how a well-executed attack can overcome material deficits. So, the big takeaway here is, always look for ways to improve your piece activity and coordinate your forces around the enemy king, especially in the endgame. Material advantage is important, but king safety and piece coordination are often the deciding factors. If you're enjoying this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more insightful chess content that will help you improve your game. Thanks for sticking with me through this exciting game. Keep practicing these attacking patterns and remember, chess is all about patience, precision, and pressure. Until next time, keep your king safe and your pieces active. Happy chessing!